my name's Babita. I run our international business, and what that means is basically my remit is markets outside of the US. So I will not be using words such as awesome, pumped, or super pumped today. Those words are banned from our panel. And it's really important that we connect more locally. We have more of these local events, and we talk about subjects which are really important to us as an industry overall. I joined Zappi about 8 years ago. Steve's crazy idea of, he wasn't so crazy now, automating the world of market research. And it was about making a difference to our industry so that we continue to provide value, we continue to help our organisations make better decisions and be smarter. And that journey never ends. And there's always something that we have to think about, how do we embrace? And today that is AI. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of AI. You're sick of hearing about AI. Some of you have dabbled in it. Some of you are scared of it. My daughter actually thinks it's cheating for her English literature exams. But as an industry, we're figuring out how to embrace it. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And we've been really privileged to work with these wonderful forward-thinking leaders within the insight world, where we've experimented, we failed, we've succeeded, and they're here to share with you their learnings. So thank you so much for coming here today, and thank you for navigating the logistics. They ended up at the wrong venue, and it wasn't their fault, but we
4 of us,
all 4 of them, but they're here. So I would like to introduce our wonderful panel. Now, these images are AI generated. So here you go. I don't know which one you prefer, Nick, but we thought we'd do something like that. So first of all, I'd love to introduce Nick Umano, who looks like this in reality, but looks like this in the network. Nick is Global Agile Innovation Human Intelligence Director at Mars, and she's also known as the Chief Joy Officer. And she certainly provides a lot of joy to our world. And then we have Tony Costello, who's Director, Global Consumer and Market Insights. And why is that Colgate? So the internet thinks you're actually at Colgate, believe it or not. Yes, there you go. What the computer generates is not always right. But actually, Tony is from Heineken. And then we have Christian. Christian, there's your image there. Yeah, and apparently he's from Heineken, but he's actually not. He's Global Insights from Colgate. And Steve, come on, there you go. Do you liking that? So Steve, our visionary who set up Zappi, our CEO. So Steve is going to host this panel, and I'm going to hand over to him and these wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey. Thank you all for coming on. So we've got like an hour or so, but and it says, I think on the program we'll have questions at the end. Actually, let's just have questions and comments as we go through. I think it would be much better. You all have experience of using AI, of thinking about AI, of integrating it within the insight process. So it would be much better if we just flung it open from the beginning. Anyone can comment, question, etc. I'll try and moderate, but not just the panel, the room. So feel free to pile in with your ideas. I'd also like to start off by thanking the panelists, not actually for showing up today, which is obviously wonderful, but much more importantly, from our perspective, they have been the pirates that we've been experimenting with. And when a new technology comes along, you need people who are brave enough to go, fuck it, I'll try something and let's play around with the data and see if it works. And these are the guys who have stood up and enabled us to experiment and do some of the weird and interesting things that we've been doing. And we'll hear a bit about that. But I was reflecting on it. We're about a year and just under a year and a half since ChatGPT was launched. We had, as a company, Zappi has been using AI right from the beginning to write our reports that were written by an old-fashioned, not very good, let's be honest, if that then this type AI. But it's meant that we've been thinking about AI from the beginning of the company. But I think all of us were transformed a year and 3-4 months ago when ChatGPT came out, and we realized how good it was. And so the first question I was going to ask for you guys is, how did that, tell me your journey of looking at that, going, oh my God, what's going on? And everyone started talking about it, and how you've been, how that personally and sort of professionally you started thinking, oh, maybe this is something we should be thinking about, as opposed to just rejecting it.
Let me start. So I am, is it a neophiliac, someone that is obsessed with new? So I always have the jobs that have never existed in the organisation. I'm a bit obsessed with building capabilities, communities of practice. So AI came along and I was like, wow, this sounds good. This is my new gig. I think this will be my new job. So as I started to explore, I realised, I think that, and I think we said it's a bit like social listening. When social listening came out, everyone in the organisation said everything we have to do now is with social listening. And so I've gone from being full throttle, learning, experimenting, to I feel like now I'm like, if you know Edward de Bono's hats, I'm the black hat in the room, and I'm the one that's trying to harness and to say, like, let's learn and experiment, but let's understand the role that these tools need to play, because we also have some pretty fabulous, capable humans in the organisation, and we have lots of other fantastic tools. And generative AI in particular is one of them. So I swing wildly from, oh, this is exciting now that this is working, and then back to, oh my gosh, you should not be just throwing all of our intelligence into that tool. So it's a bit of a peaks and troughs for me, but mostly excited and constantly just still learning. Machines are still learning, and we're all still learning. So for me, it just needs to stay a very open conversation as the capabilities build. And unfortunately, in a big global business, it also becomes about risk mitigation and making sure we're using this in a way and making the right decisions with it. So that's my journey so far.
Shall I jump in? Yeah, and so, yeah, we've spoken before, and very familiar story of the initial excitement, then the realization of some of the flaws and so on. I think, and we talked, you mentioned some of the previous experiences like social listening, and some of the others that we've all lived through, and those of us with grey hairs have lived through a few more of them. But also some of the lessons learned through that. And while on the one hand as well, we're excited and we're trying to balance that, what this can do, but also what it can't do, and getting deep into it. What our very senior executive team are getting is they're getting bombarded by companies, new emerging companies on the one hand, but also big established consultants who are coming and saying, guys, aren't you using AI to do this? Why have you still got an insights department? You should get rid of that and replace it with AI. And we went through it before, and we honestly, I think in some cases in the companies I've been in, were a little bit slow, and we're pointing out all of the reasons why that wasn't going to be the case and why we were still going to need insights. Sometimes the perception is then that, oh, but you guys are just the block, you're the resistors. Why aren't you embracing this? So there's a fine line, and been super clear to show that while I understand all the flaws and the watch outs and so on, that it's myself and my department who are saying, we need to lean into this, we need to experiment, we need to push forward, because if we're not doing that internally, then people are going around us, and then it's people who are not pointing out all the flaws and not understanding what all the issues are. So I've been full in being Mr. AI within the organization, because I want it to be seen that we are the ones that are driving.
Good, yeah. What they said. No, but we were joking about that before, exactly. No, but I mean, it's similar also for us. I think the interesting bit about Gen AI, in particular ChatGPT, is that everyone experienced at work, but also at home. And I think that was a real differentiator, because sometimes you have new things. I mean, social listening. Nobody outside of work really cared about social listening, as a couple of people brought that example. But with generative AI, out of sudden, everyone was doing it. Kids were doing it for school. We and I also told that story yesterday. We used it this year for the Christmas dinner, because we usually host kind of the whole family, and then it's always kind of, okay, what do we have for dinner and so on. Basically, I briefed ChatGPT, and we got really great menu, and everyone really liked it. So, and it's very, I mean, I think that's usually the thing. I mean, I think my English is okay, but in translating stuff from German and Swiss German into English is a bit difficult, but I can send the menu around if somebody's interested overall, because I think it's basically just one prompt away. I just have to say translate this in English, and then you also get it then, including shopping list and so on. But what the point I wanted to make is really like the push came from everywhere. Like Tony said, it came internally, but it also came from external agencies. So everyone was out of a sudden an expert in Gen AI. So even the most kind of boring companies that we work with, were out of a sudden, okay, but we are now cutting edge Gen AI front runners. And then when you looked at it, they basically just had a regular access to sometimes not even the enterprise version of ChatGPT. So that was basically happening, that it was discussion area. So every morning discussion, every staff meeting was just about Gen AI at home and at work. And I think that changed. So therefore, there was a lot of excitement at the beginning. But then, of course, big company like Colgate, you also have then the IT department, legal department, and so on. Basically, after I think the first 2 or 3 weeks where everyone was experimenting around, okay, you have to shut down. You can't use any company data, even if it's not deemed as confidential in Gen AI, whatever Gen AI is. So let us sort it out. And then I thought, okay, that's basically it for us. We'll never use it again. But interesting enough, then IT was really fast, and then also legal, to set up our own kind of Gen AI hub internally that is within our firewall. So therefore, we can experiment a lot. Yes, it's not always the latest version of and then we don't have all the custom GPTs at the moment, but it's still great. And also the successes, the small success. It's always like for us also get the quick wins on the board. That's super important. And we had so many use cases that were really positive that made life so much easier across functions, but also in particular for insights and analytics that really fueled that kind of adoption. And I think now everyone is basically on our version of generative AI, using it for different use cases. And we are now basically trying to set up this governance. What can Gen AI do? Where is the human in the loop, how we usually refer to it, is important. So who can add value where? And that's exactly what we're currently doing, and I think also doing quite well with a clear plan how to approach that.
I want to go higher and more strategic and talk about the company and its attitude later. But let's get a bit specific for now. How and where are you using generative AI, both at scale and at the experiments?
A very recent use case is really great. Everyone has, if you're on client side, you have a lot of qual data, usually now all transcribed and so on. You use it for a project and you never look at it again. Yes, there are a couple of platforms where you can search for it, but it's very difficult. So what we did is basically we just, I think we had 500 hours of something around kind of oral care whitening usage, that we then had the transcriptions. Then we put it into Gen AI, had a lot of cleanup, because in transcriptions you have a lot of filler words, you have moderator and so on. And that was quite interesting because, it took us a couple of iterative steps to really get rid of the moderator things, because you don't want to bias the whole outcome, because a moderator repeats the same question or the same kind of prompt to all the respondents. So getting rid of that was a bit painful, but it worked out. So now we have our prompt and how that works. And then really made that now a chat environment, so people now can talk to all these people at once and basically ask questions. What do you think about this? Also probing new product ideas, and that's actually great because that brings insights to life. That's exactly what we wanted to have. Yes, everyone experimented around with having live booths during senior meetings and so on, where people can then talk to actual consumers. But now you can basically talk to a breadth, so really kind of a representative sample to specific target groups at scale and everyone in the company. So we also open it up to R&D and so on. So that's really a very interesting use case and very specific, which is at least wasn't possible at that scale before.
I can jump in, and a couple of areas where I think Gen AI particularly is very well designed for, similar to what Christian talks about, is what it's phenomenal at is taking masses of unstructured data and summarizing it very well. That's what it's brilliant at. But that's a huge issue in a big company like Heineken, where we've got tons and tons of research summaries that no one ever goes back into. If you want to find what do we already know about a certain topic, you have to know where to find it. Even if someone has loaded it onto our repository and maybe tagged it, you're still not going to get the insight you want. With Gen AI, and we're working together with our knowledge management providers, it's super easy to be able to trawl through the tens of thousands of pieces of research we have and pull out some of the key insights and help you find what we've already got. So that's from a no-brainer, super easy application that has a big impact on our organization from day one. So that was one. And I think the other thing that Gen AI is particularly good at is it's how it's been trained, is to articulate things in a simple consumer language, something which we should be good at, but we're not. And our marketing teams especially are not very good at. They think they're amazing, but they're so deep into their category.
Isn't that their job?
You would think, wouldn't it? That's why they won't have jobs. But they're not. They can't help themselves be more excited about the category than the average consumer is. And here, the Gen AI can really help to make sure you're articulating something in a way that a consumer would articulate it and understand it. So those two jump out as the obvious no-brainer.
And at Mars, we have Gen AI sitting across nearly every tool we have, including our knowledge zone. So in partnership with Market Logic, we use it mostly in the discover stage for innovations. So to help us summarize in a simple way, and we use it to help us build hypotheses. So anything that we do with the Gen AI tools, we then validate with other tools, but it helps us spark new ideas. It helps us build out target consumers, and we always love like throwing the different target consumers into the tools and seeing, you know, if we built for this consumer, what would it look like versus this consumer. So it gives us ideas and points us in a direction, but then we're typically jumping back more into a traditional model. We're about to do a whole lot of global ideation squads around the world for new opportunity spaces, and we're building it into the way we ideate live in sessions as well. So there's lots of places, but typically earlier on in the funnel versus further along for us, because we validate with more traditional tools, and we need the humans to make sure that we can make sure it's linked up to the strategy. And I guess also then there's legalities around how much have you built this versus how much did AI build it, and do you own this idea and things like that. So we tend to get a lot more involved. I'll stop talking now, Steve, I promise.
Actually, I was going to throw it open. I don't know if anyone else is sitting there thinking, oh, well, we use it for this, and any ideas out there? Yeah.
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, thank you, Babita, I remember. Yeah, and if I understood well, it's fantastic at summarizing qualitative output, but turning it into quantitative. Yeah, no, we're not using it for that today. There are some agencies that are talking about that, which I think does have potential. But for me, it's still a lot of caveats and needs to be proven. But no, we're not at the moment. We're still using it more qualitatively to get to some insights, rather than saying, yeah, a certain percentage agree with this, which I think is difficult still at this stage.
I don't think I'm that good a shot, I'm afraid. There are some amazing tools around for doing that in very ring-fenced data sets. So we use it a lot in quant tools. We particularly use one that we were using before ChatGPT came out, that's really good at crunching those themes and making them into numbers that I don't know how good that would be. It's not good compared to the one that we use in Qual. We're sort of in the process of trying and experimenting across the two, so we can let you know how that goes. But it is possible to get it to chunk big themes into numbers. The thing it isn't possible to do, and where you need the humans, is to think about it from a discourse analysis point of view, because it's really rubbish at telling the difference between I like the bit where blah blah versus I relate to that, and that I can feel that working in my life. And it's that nuance of language that we're finding it just can't spot for us.
And maybe also building on that, the key thing is always a combination. I said combination of AI and human intelligence and so on, but also consumer research, because I mean that's the key thing. So sometimes you save a lot of time in that upfront bit to generate the stimulus, for example, and then you can then sense check that with consumers. So we also very often, with what I mentioned before, we get the inspiration from that qual kind of at scale, but then we very often then try to quantify it later on with traditional consumer research, at least for the time being. There will be other ways maybe in the future as well, but at least that's a good starting point, that you just say, okay, now it takes you half a day to generate all that content, and then you can use that to then test it quantitatively, get to the sizes, and then proceed with those and then iterate with those.
This is the question, I guess, for all of you, but specifically Nick.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Specifically, I guess, for you, Nick, because you mentioned that you sort of ask it questions to specific personas and stuff. How are you dealing with the fact that the data in there might be biased to begin with, and how are you managing that?
I was actually a bit witchy. I was about to say also what's interesting, I think, and we found is we're using AI to optimize, and I think it is still the case, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's largely US focused, Gen AI. It's got a lot of intelligence from the US market, so it can optimize better for some markets versus others. And that's exactly why there's huge bias in the tool. There's people throwing lots of rubbish into the tool and misinformation. And so that's why I say we use it to shape hypotheses, and then we have other tools to test and validate. So we kind of use it to spark good ideas, really, and to, see where we might stretch or push, but jumping always back into a Zappi. And then for us, all of the work we do is tested at small scale in the real world. And that's still the best way to learn, versus synthetic consumers and AI. But we use it to get us started and to kind of push us into places where, the same old Mars brains trying to build new ideas might not get. So.
If I can build on it, because I think it's a really key point. And well, actually, one of the experiments we did with Zappi, we took a concept that been developed developed initially by humans, optimized by AI. It did much better in the US market and was flat to even slightly worse in the UK market. So still English, but just that nuance of and to most of us, all the marketeers were saying, but there's no difference in any of these. It should all be flat. And it wasn't, because it was really optimizing it for US consumers. And now, anecdotal, because it was one test, but interesting to see if that holds true more regularly. But the second point I wanted to pick up on is what you were just saying, Nick, which I think is absolutely critical, is when we think about, and again, super excited about the opportunities with synthetic data and being able to test a new idea amongst a set of consumers created by Gen AI. Really exciting, but also very concerning in wearing the black hat that you talked about, of what's going to happen to our databases if we put results of those tests into our databases. Then you're going to end up, over time, your database is going to be muddied with real consumers and fake consumers. And initially, it's not going to be such a problem. But the more and more, you're not refreshing your database with responses from real consumers. So we're coming to a very similar point around saying where we should be using AI and especially synthetic samples is in design phase, which is pulling on the data from years and years and thousands of concepts and things tested amongst real people, optimizing and developing new things based on that, but then go back and test it with real consumers afterwards so that you're refreshing your database as well.
That's a really good point, and maybe also something where, if Steve, if you have thought as the Zappi team already about that, because we're having exactly that discussion now. We have now a lot of AI HI generated concept, but also a lot of AI only generated concept. Now the question is, should we add them to the database, or should we keep them separate and then maybe have in future kind of 3 databases, that and combined? But I just want to see if you had that discussion internally and you see any kind of risk that Tony mentioned.
Yeah, we have, and actually, if you look at, there are people who would look at GPT-4 and say it is not as good as GPT 3.5 in certain ways, because it's been trained on a newer internet, and 30% of new internet content is generated by an AI, so it's just repeating itself. And I think we have exactly the same problem in Insight, is that if you're putting AI generated responses into your database, my view, I was having this conversation with someone the other day. At the moment, people use our system to test ideas. And I think in 2 years' time, they will think of the function of doing the test as to test an idea and to refresh the database. And so you will be doing both simultaneously, maybe more judicious, maybe testing less often for the sake of the particular result, but thinking more of your data asset. And that's where we're moving very much. If you think about any form of generative AI, it exists on sort of 3 planes. So it has the algorithm underneath, most of which are now leaked. Then it has and it's being trained on a data set. And then it has the data you push it at, which is increasingly, I think, where market research plays a really strong role, because it's a genuinely new data set. It's a very strong data set. It understands people, particularly if you've got a lot of language in there. And then there's a UX on top. So I think it means that we as researchers are an incredibly brilliant position, because we can be the data asset that is being used by the AI to create new ideas, to test new ideas, to create new products, services, packs. But the critical thing is that we manage and worry about that data asset a lot. And that might be your knowledge management system, it might be your Zappi system, but that increasingly seems to me the role of the researcher. I don't know if you'd agree or... Any other thoughts from outside? One of the things I wanted to do is touch on something you touched on earlier, which is, and I remember the social media craze, but the social media craze was really limited to sort of insight and marketing, whereas AI is just across the whole organization. And every time McKinsey comes in, they're giving your senior leaders an AI strategy, I'm sure. You guys are trying to be at the forefront of that. How do you manage those sort of corporate trade winds against what you're doing? How do you become a part of the change, not changed upon? Is that a major battle for you?
I could start because absolutely. I think that's a constant danger, as you say. The likes of McKinsey, BCG, they're all going directly with their AI solutions, and there are some areas where fine, go ahead, help to grow the bubble, but there are some that greatly concern me for sure. So yeah, we absolutely need to be in the middle of that. Again, I think for me, it's making sure that that our senior management see that we're not just sitting by and letting this happen around us, but that we're getting involved in it. We ran a session with Zappi, but with so an internal team building session using AI tools to also train more of our people in using these things. Because while we say, and I think maybe a lot of us are using it, and Christian's great example of his Christmas dinner, for a lot of people, and by the way, scarily, a lot of our senior managers, they're not as tech savvy as you might think, or they might try and pretend to be. So getting them using the tools and seeing for themselves what some of those caveats are, seeing some of the initial concepts that came out that were winning concepts, where they basically said, here's a new drink that's super high in alcohol and it's cheap. Guess what? It performed very well. And this we help to people see this is why you need to have a human in the loop. We can't just let things go over. There are a lot of caveats. So giving people the experience and trying to fast track that, because with the social listening, I remember some of the discussions around, we're not going to need to do brand equity tracking anymore because it'll all be available and consumers will tell us what they think of our brands. And this was flying around for months and months, and us in the insights department being told, why are we still spending hundreds of thousands doing brand tracking? And we couldn't just say, okay, we'll stop it then and do an experiment. And it takes a lot of time. Here, it's super easy. Do an experiment. Say, yeah, sure. Yes, and it's don't be the people that are no, but there are these issues. No, but these are all the issues. So yes, and that's a great idea, and we're going to do it. And here's the results. And they go, but there are issues. Yeah, so that's why we need to work it and take our time to develop something that can, but be the yes and, not the no but.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You want to go?
I was going to say, I'm very tempted to take the consequence parenting path sometimes and say, you should do that.
Yeah.
Like, just see how you go and see what the outputs are. And I think the worst thing we can do is tell people that they can't use the tools. Everyone across every function should be on the tools. They should be experimenting. They should be understanding the capabilities. And I think particularly for the senior leaders, they should understand the risks, and that's usually much more, a much better way to get their attention. But to understand that I think the perfect model is always a hybrid model, right? It's always a hybrid model. It's use the machines for the right jobs and use the humans for the right jobs. And it's that beautiful blend of machines and humans, and understanding where you might be able to automate and save a little bit of money and time, but where it's really important to use deep empathy. And ultimately, the innovation I think that connects best is innovation. And we talk about insights that you can feel. And so innovation that connects with a human. Look, there's not very many examples where AI has been able, as you said, AI has been able to build that. And so, we're kind of erring on the side of more human than machine at the moment. If the machines get better, we'll go there. But just keep on helping people understand the capabilities and when is, that right time to automate. We've working on a project with Accenture where we're digitizing every step of every person's job around the world, which is mind-blowing and exciting. It's crazy. And as a futurist, I love it. And also part of what, you hear leadership throughout sometimes is, I think we could automate this many jobs, as a result of this. I'm like, wow, like maybe in the future, maybe when machines have learned, but as quickly as they learn, landscapes change and different capabilities mean that there might be a better path to take. So you still have to be agile and be able to say, at this point of time, this is the right way to do it, but we're always reviewing and optimizing. I don't think you can ever be stagnant now, unfortunately. It would be nice, wouldn't it, just to have a little break from AI and say, yeah, we've got it worked out for now.
I mean, proactivity is basically key to what you said, because I mean, if you are just sitting back and then waiting until senior management tells you, have you used this tool, then that's not great. So that's why we established very early on kind of we call it Gen AI Council. So basically a group of experts from different functions. So altogether, I think we now 23. So really a very broad representation of the company, and then we use within that group, we use kind of wisdom of the crowd. And now if kind of our CEO or so on gets kind of a lead from a partner that we work with and so on, he's not responding, he sends it to us, and then we have an educated guess or kind of an opinion about that all together, and then we evaluate from the different perspective, from design, from HR, from legal, from finance, from IT and so on, and that's definitely helping. So also picking the right partners and then also sticking to it. But I think great also if the company has a commitment to say, yeah, everyone will tell you that they can do it, but let's create a team of experts and then also build that trust within the company. If their team says maybe not, then we are not doing it, even if it sounds quite interesting.
And we're touching upon this, and we've touched all the way through. There seems to be simultaneously huge excitement and complete terror of the capabilities of AI, data leakage and legal ramifications, et cetera, So, and I know you've all gone through and are going through how the company navigates that. Given that you've got the legal department, you've got you've got McKinsey, you've got Accenture helping out. What do you see your role in helping manage particularly the negative side and keep people informed and not be hidebound so you can't do anything?
Showing the positive examples within the boundaries given, because I think, yeah, so if there's a new boundary, then you can either complain and stop doing stuff or find then workarounds, and that's what we're doing. So I think all the things that I think also Nick mentioned, give it a try and try again and so on. That's super important. So for me, it's always like this. Yes, if there are legal concerns to put whatever financial reports in there, don't put any financial reports in there. But then there are other ways, because you can still, there's also a lot of public information. I mean, if we already publish it on our investor relations website, that's anyway in ChatGPT, at least once it's updated with fresh data set. That's also something you can use internally. So I think, and that's again where human judgment also comes into play. Yes, we also make sometimes mistakes, but I think overall we understand, because we've been in that job for quite a while. And then we're just also discussing yesterday. I mean, we testing innovation ideas that will be launched in 3, 5, 10 years. We giving it out to consumers. We can't really control what's happening then. But we also have been doing that over the last decades, and it worked out quite well. Yes, there are a couple of instances where it's not working, but it's still better trying it and getting some feedback than just always being cautious and see only the negative side and therefore not doing stuff.
Yeah.
A shift from a carb-based diet to a protein-based diet as negatively. Back if it were asked that question in the early 90s, it would say no, you must purchase. Today it would say no, what diets might get to in 5 years, but the AI would evaluate your new proposed diet accountable with synthetic consumers.
So the question was around how we think about how changes in consumer, I think you're saying changes in consumer attitudes and values, and also development of new categories may impact consumer reactions. Completely agree with, but this comes back to a point that I think we were saying before around synthetic samples can be great to understand and help you to develop new ideas, etc. But for me, we will always need to refresh that data set with new new data, with testing with real consumers, with in order to get around that issue. Otherwise, we will be stuck in whenever the latest version of ChatGPT came out. And actually, as you said, we'll be stuck with ChatGPT 3.5, because after that, it's all just repetition of what was there before. So we've got to the base data that's used needs to be constantly refreshed. But that's, to be fair, the same issue that we've always had. You know, we've had concept and advertising databases. Some companies have had them for 25, 30 years. And I remember even when I was in Procter & Gamble 15 plus years ago, we were saying, yeah, but hang on, some of the concepts in here and some of what we're testing against now is so outdated. Are we sure there's still? And we were testing and understanding, do we need to refresh? Do we need to purge all of the data from before a certain date? We were doing those kind of experiments. We'll need to do the same, but just with a different set of data.
I'd say that, and I still think the role of anthropologists who understand humans and kind of pushing is incredibly important. The role of foresight teams has never been more important, I think, in big organisations. So to be collecting all of those signals, and for us to be, you know, we talk about innovation in Horizon 4, which is whole new business models, and I don't think that AI is capable of that yet. I think that's still well in the domain of the human brain working with AI. And so, you know, this is why I say a hybrid model is always the best one. It's always a number of tools and a number of humans with different skills to get you to those really new breakthrough ideas. Be great if AI can do it in the future, but I'm not that confident.
If I can build on that, because I think that's absolutely correct, and we've just worked to refresh our internal insights vision for what we want to do, and we've simple 4 words of democratize insight and develop foresight. And foresight's been around for a long time, but at least in Heineken, I think in a lot of other big companies, it's that there's not as big a focus on it as there could be, because everybody's so focused on getting fantastic insight, which we still need. This is where I think the tools can really help us, and we've moved away from, and with Gen AI, we really can get, and I was talking about the how we can use our knowledge management systems. That means that all of the great insight that we have, people can get access to it. You can ask it questions, and it can give you in human language some insights that we already have. If you have knowledge gaps, going and running a fresh piece of research, honestly, me and my team, we're not adding a great deal of value in most of that stuff, right? That can now be democratized across the whole organization. And then my team, who are real experts in deeply understanding and being able to develop and predict things that you don't see in the data yet, I agree that the AI is not going to help there. That's where we should be spending more of our time and energy, and can be enabled by having the stuff that the new tools can do, take that work away from us. I had one of the best pieces of advice I ever got early in my career was from a boss who said, your job is to constantly make yourself obsolete. And if you do that, don't be afraid to make yourself obsolete, because the people who do that are the ones who will be the next new challenge will be given to you. And it's absolutely the case here. The people that are frightened that AI and Gen AI is going to come and take my job away, it's like, fantastic. Do you want to be doing 40 concepts developments a year? And no, leave that. That can be automated. There are ways that we're not there to completely let go, but we can do that gradually. And you can spend more time doing the super exciting stuff, the anthropology, the semiotics, the thinking, how is this going to develop that consumers can't articulate yet? So it's not going to be in the data. That's where we should be spending our time.
And I mean, Gen AI is also pretty good in kind of not predicting, because predicting is always, but that has been a struggle for ages with any kind of new technology. But what it can do quite well, and that's why I think could also be used to look into different categories and adjacent categories, is come up with possible scenarios. Because for me, it's kind of foresight. For me, it's also less about predicting what will happen in 10 years, 20 years. It's more like opening up kind of the canvas and basically saying what could happen, what are the different scenarios. And that's where human beings are sometimes a bit constrained. And that's where Gen AI, you can basically just ask, if it only gives you one scenario, then you can just write, give me 10 different scenarios that are distinct enough. And then out of a sudden you get really that kind of broad possible future scenarios. And then you can then prioritize them. Still, the question is how to do that. But overall, the exploration part with Gen AI is really great. I mean, we just tested concepts, and the verbatims that came back that some people thought it's not great were kind of, that's completely odd. That I've never heard that in oral care and so on, where some people might think, okay, that's bad, so we have to re-engineer the prompt that to make it more close to what we already know. But we actually said, no, that's great, because these are the things that no insights person or marketer usually comes up with. Yes, some of them are completely rubbish and don't make sense, but some spark these ideas, think, okay, we've never thought about that. Then you give it to R&D, that, yeah, that it is kind of possible. So I think using it not to validate or predict really what's happening, but be more creative, be more open, create a lot of scenarios, because you can basically create infinite scenarios within a split second. And that's really great. Then you have to then think about to narrow it down. But we use that a lot. And I think that will be a strong use case. And therefore, Gen AI will have a big role in the foresight space as well.
And Steve, to circle back, you said, what is the job of insights? And I think the job of insights is to keep on pushing the boundaries as well of the governance, to keep on testing in an ethical way, in a human-centered way, typically where the objective function in the business. But the job is to keep on saying, this is okay, we can go here, or maybe we shouldn't go here. But to keep on pushing, because the lawyers are always going to take the most conservative approach, and we're never going to get into the really fun, innovative spaces if we don't work out where we can safely push.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this earlier. In some of the experiments where we've used insight data to create new products or services or campaigns, it's actually been much more creative and wacky than we expected, right? So it is not creating generic responses. It is creating completely out there ones. And like your example of the high alcohol, very low price, sometimes we just know it's stupid, right? But it's highly creative. It takes me on to the future, right? So we're thinking out. I know normally you'd say 5 years. I think that's way too far in the world the way it's moving now. But in the next year or two, where do you see the scope for AI? we've talked about my theory that actually it'll get rid of marketing and Insight will just do a reverse takeover of marketing. That's my belief. So where do you see it, both generally and specifically? What are the things that it can do? How will it change your roles? How will it change the company?
I think it will be much more integrated and basically seamlessly integrated in your day-to-day work, but also life. So when you think about kind of all the things at CES, that simultaneous translation, for example. I mean, now it's always very difficult. In the future, it might be just part of your earbuds and so on. And other things, yeah, exactly, yeah. That was one of the things that I liked about CES this year. But overall, currently we always think, okay, and now I log into Gen AI, or now I use Gen AI. In the future, it's much more blended into your day work. And then the key task for us as an insights department is then to also kind of take that step back and then also say, is that really what we want to and what we need to understand from consumers? Because in the end, I mean, we are selling still products to consumers and not to Gen AI. It might work well in that environment, but we still have to make sure that it's fitting to needs that are out there. And I think that will be our key role. But overall, it will be less of a discussion, okay, is that a use case for Gen AI? Because Gen AI most likely will be part of everything that we do. It's just like the question, how much will it be? Is it 90% Gen AI, or is it only 10%? And I think companies will work out what fits best. I think the big challenge for, in particular, big companies like us is how can you keep the competitive advantage? Because insights democratization, I mean, now basically we're doing a lot of work to segment consumers, doing need states and all these type of things. Costs a fortune, takes a long time. We think that's super proprietary. I basically just had a quite sophisticated prompt, but just put it in and basically said, let now create 5 segments. And actually, it looked quite good. I mean, I basically sent it to also some of the marketers, said that that's a new segmentation study and so on. And said, yeah, it's quite interesting. It fits to what we already see. And then I basically said, yeah, that took me 2 minutes. And that's not consumer based, but I think that's exactly because now anyone can do that. Yes, you still need production capabilities and so on. But when it just comes to pure consumer understanding and so on, if we are not really trying to reinvent ourselves, make ourselves obsolete and trying new things, then at some point, everyone will have the same understanding, the same knowledge, and it will be even more difficult to be differentiated.
Yeah, and we've been thinking a lot about this question of with these tools being in everybody's hands. Indeed, the advantage that big corporates might have can disappear very quickly. So how do we keep an advantage? How do we have a competitive advantage? And it comes down to, and you talked about what the role of insights teams can be in the future. It can be, for me, it's going to be a lot more both the prompt writing, because that was such a good, you say it was a complex prompt and took 2 minutes, but that's because you understood how to write that prompt in a way you knew which sources to go and look at and to point the AI towards. You knew which boundaries and constraints to put around it to get an output that would make a lot of sense. Some of the training we need to do is to help people understand how can insights people that are trained in thinking around, again, one of the other fantastic things I was always taught was great insights. Being a great insights person is not about answering questions. It's about asking the right questions. And this is just, I think Gen AI is that to the nth degree. Getting the answers is now irrelevant. Anybody can get the answers to any question you want. Right? It's super easy, and they may not be 100% correct, but getting the answers is not difficult. It's asking the right questions, and that's what we've been trained in for generations. And we need to take it to the next level to asking the questions in a way that's going to get a brilliant, insightful response back from the AI that can really move things forward. So I think that's going to be a huge change for all of us. But then also, so that's one side is having the right questions, and then the other side is having the right data. And which is why I'm so keen that we make sure that we refresh our databases with real consumers and so on. So we're not using the 2021 version of the internet as our basis for all understanding for the future.
Do we become prompt engineers? This is, I think, the major role for researchers in the future is one of them's got to be is prompt engineering.
Yeah. But don't. And sometimes when I talk that internally, people go, "Oh, that's an IT role. That sounds very dull and boring." It's not. It's are you a curious person who knows how to ask the right questions? And then reframe it like that, and people go, yeah, that I know how to do. I just need to slightly learn some new language, but I know how to ask questions.
But we can build on a lot of knowledge that we have, because I mean, what have we been doing so far? We translate usually business questions into research questions, and we get answers back, and then we translate it back into business actions overall. So I think that's exactly the skill set that you now also need for prompt engineering. Yes, you sometimes have to build on best practice, and then we're trying to build kind of bases, also custom GPTs that you basically say, okay, you don't have to start from scratch all the time. There are certain things that should always be part if you generate a concept, if you generate a segment and so on. But then there's also some creativity needed, and that's exactly where the insights department and maybe also marketing has a role to play in the future. So I'm not sure if we can get rid completely of marketing, but maybe of
Just
some
most of it.
people.
I think the skill sets will change as the tools change too. I think you need to be a prompt engineer now. If the machines learn well, you'll be able to ask them using natural language. And so the way that we ask questions, actually, my hypothesis is if we keep on prompt engineering and asking the machines in the way that machines would ask each other questions, then it'll stay that way and it won't learn. Actually, the best thing we can do is teach it human language. And I think, you know, when I talk about the future of insights is not less humans. It's actually using the humans in a better way. It's having humans understand how to partner with the machines, and it's working out how those humans give you the competitive advantage. It really is. And so as landscapes, as technologies evolve, as human needs, us as humans, as we start to live our lives in different ways. And we got a virtual reality headset for Christmas, the family. And I can start to imagine, you know, as we run out of food for the world and there's no water, like that people will be living their lives in a virtual reality headset. Now, the innovation that we're building for humans in 30 or 40 years might be really different to what we're building now. So the needs and the capabilities will continue to evolve, and you just have to be agile and on top of it. And I think, you know, as I look at my kids at school and what the education system is teaching them, I think the most important skill set that you can nurture is creativity. So it's not just being able to be a creative human, but being able to build an environment in an organisation where people can be creative, where they can take risks and they can suggest crazy things and not get shot down. So I hope that's what the future of insights is. And to be a critical partner for marketers if we don't get rid of them altogether.
Yes. When Steve, at the beginning of the session, you said how also probably the role of insight is going to change in the future, and you're going to be very much responsible of the database from where AI is getting inputs. I really like that part, especially because of how also it's important asking the right questions, because yes, we need to ask the right question, and not only for helping the AI tool to create the right concepts, but as well the right questions that created the database at the beginning, probably especially in qual. This is not only in quant, but I see a lot the human aspects having an essential part in this first step of having a database that is made of inputs that are coming from answers to the right questions. I think it's very important also, this piece.
Yeah, and I think it's a big change that the industry is going through. I remember, you know, if you've asked, I did this at a conference in Germany once, I asked the audience, the clients, where their typical report lived, and it lives on PowerPoint and maybe on a shelf, and that data has to be in a database, and it has to be reusable, and it has to be continuously updated. Otherwise, it's a waste of time doing the project, right? If you're going to throw away the data, why'd you bother nowadays? And I think it takes us on to questions about what that data is. So we've all talked a bit about text rather than numbers. At the moment, 90% of the industry is probably numbers, 10% text. I can't imagine that's going to be true in 2 years' time, right? Because text is suddenly way more valuable. How do you see that that type of insight, the type of data, the way you manage it change?
Would even take a step further, because I mean text, yes, but also kind of video, people speaking, and because then you have the sentiment and so on. And yes, there were 10 years ago, there were also companies saying, okay, now they can track sentiment when people are talking and so on. But I think all the demos that I saw were okay. Then also what we do currently, I mean, and then it's a good proxy, but when you do advertising pre-testing and so on, that you then click on faces, that you try to measure somehow if people are smiling and so on. In the future, that will be much more sophisticated, because then AI will be able to process video, speech, and so on, and be also better in recognizing that. So for me, it's like now we can actually do the research that we wanted to do, because very often we had to translate something into a questionnaire, because that was the only way how you could basically research it, because otherwise it was too expensive, was not doable, and so on. And then we also had to then coding answers. I mean, I don't know how many of you have started their career with doing that stuff, but that was so boring. And of course, you make mistakes, and also you limit the information. You basically go from information index of 100 to 10 maybe. If you're good, maybe to 12, but that's it. So I think that's where the huge possibilities and opportunities with Gen AI, or with AI in that case, are, because now you can process all of that rich information. You don't have that information lost anymore. And then you can actually ask the question you wanted to ask, and not put it into a 5-point scale or whatever. That doesn't make sense. But in order to, because whenever you create a questionnaire, you always think about, how do I analyze that later on? And that will go away in the future, because now you think about, how can I ask the question in a way that I get most rich information? Don't worry about analysis, because there will be technology that can do that in the future.
It comes back to the integrated systems. That's our wish, right? Isn't it? For like an AI tool that can give us access to all of the data, regardless of whether it's numbers or text or videos. And so as a tool that can help you blend all of that as a human, to take those outputs and then make the decisions that you need to make with those, inputs and outputs, is what we all wish for. The biggest challenge, I think, is just still, and it's more and more every day, the volume of data. And it's being able to understand, with all of the content that you get access to, what is the most critical content that you need to make this decision. And I see still people like going swirling in circles because they've got access to so much information, but they don't know what the right information is to make that decision. And I think there's real value in humans that can really focus in and say, I could confidently make this decision if I had this point, and this point, and maybe it is some numbers and it is some qual, and gee, I'd love it if AI could get better at observing human behaviour and being able to code human behaviour and give us intelligence as well. So, if that's the perfect world, then you're able to just ask a question. It's able to do all of that in the background and spit out, then scenarios, right? There's never one right answer. There's so many ways you can solve a challenge, and sometimes you're not even solving the right challenge.
I think that then also training, because currently we train large language models. In the future, we might train large emotional models and so on. So I think it's only a matter of time to do that. Will that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I mean, currently it's difficult because there is no way, because you can't. I mean, yes, you have to then put it into a quant scale again to quantify emotion and so on. In the future, it might be different. And I think it also depends on the output, because currently we think of tables, presentation, and so on at the output. But maybe in the future, you basically generate a synthetic consumer that you then can talk to, and that tells you about their day, about how they use the product, also with the associated emotions. And you can also think about, but that's hypothesizing, is then that you basically have kind of an emotional kind of graph or chart next to it, that you say, okay, now that person actually, even if you don't see it in the face expression, is highly emotionally aroused by or excited and so on. I don't know yet, but I think there are definitely, with the pace that the industry is currently going, it looks pretty well that this is possible. I mean, we have a couple of examples, but it's still a bit further out. But I think also when somebody told you a year ago that you could basically write whatever, you can even write a full book with just a few prompts and so on, and then refining it. I mean, you would say that's crazy. Nowadays, that's possible. I mean, you can basically all our kids can do their homework within a second. They just have to basically type the question, say use these sources, and then they can write an essay of whatever words. You can even put the word count. Will that be in the future? Will it be possible to create a synthetic human being? Potentially, yes, at least for research purposes. I think one big question that we haven't really tackled is then what are kind of also the ethics around that, because then you have ethics, you have data privacy and so on. So that's also, it's always the question, what can we do and what should we do? And that's, I think, something that will come up at some point. And I think currently, at least, that's currently a lot of the role that people push on governments, but maybe in the future there will be others, like also kind of like SMR and so on in our industry, or we as big corporations and big agencies like Zappi. So I think there will be a big discussion as well. What is therefore then the role of these synthetic consumers? I think if it's just back to can we create them at some point? I think yes, definitely. The question is then how should we use them and should we create them?
I was going to ask a question on that. Like in this hypothetical world where we've created and we think we know what someone is feeling, we are sort of excluding the fact that neurodiverse people don't demonstrate emotion in the same way. So who, in your view, is in charge of managing that and controlling and understanding those biases that are in those data and not just completely alleviating neurodiverse as an example, but actually we know males and females demonstrate emotions in different ways. Like fundamentally, it would be great. Who's in charge of managing that? Who's in charge of controlling that?
I think both questions come to the same geeky place in some sense, which is the importance we place on managing and tagging data assets. And if you have sampled appropriately and tagged that data appropriately, you should be able to identify that and say that that type of person experiences emotion in a different way. The problem is I don't think we are thinking about data in that way. So we're not thinking deeply enough about the structures, the tags, the associated potential use cases that the database has, which gets back to your point, Aidan, about once you have it, what do you do with it? And I think we have to, too much of the industry has been reactive for a long time. We now need to be proactive. We now need to think about these issues about managing a database. We need to experiment about using it, but also worry about what it's used for. And I think that's an enormous change the way the industry works, the way the industry thinks about things. But I think with leaders like these guys, I think we're beginning to move in that direction.
Yeah, and if I can just build on that, because I think we just need to be careful and not try and recreate what we've been doing in the old world and mirror that with new tools. I think it's a great discussion we've just been having around, you know, the data versus the sentiment, etc. If you were starting again and you didn't have 50 years of running concept tests and databases, would you ask somebody a definitely would buy scale on 1 to 5 and get a percentage? No, you wouldn't. You'd ask them in real language, get some kind of measure of excitement towards a proposition and build a database around that. But no one, well, maybe people are, I'm sure people are thinking about that. But at the moment, it's how do we create agents that can give us a definitely would buy score that can compare to our old database rather than what's going to be the new way of thinking, right? So it's how do we develop, given the new tools, rather than, you know, just recreate what we have before, new ways of thinking. And but to your points, with the ethics built in, with the database management, with everything for that new world rather than replicating the old.
Yeah, and again, I mean, at least in the industry that most of us are working, the market will regulate itself, because I can create, also back in the days, I can cheat and create a concept or an ad that will pass a pre-test and will perform well in a database comparison, but it has to be launched at some point. And if people are not buying it, not repurchasing it, then you have a problem. So therefore, that's why we do also this, and that's why a lot of agencies have been criticized, and an insights department as well. We always show us great scores in pre-testing, and then we launch it and it doesn't work overall. But we're also getting better in that. So I think, are we there 80% success rate? Not really, because otherwise you also wouldn't have, I think, I don't know what is the current success rate of FMCG products, 1%, 2%, whatever. So definitely rather low. So that's why I said, again, we are selling products to people. So we are not creating something that then has to work with AI and that is great for machines and so on. No, people have to actually purchase it, repurchase it, like it. And that's why we have to make sure that whatever we create synthetically and then also test, creating databases and whatever, will also be representative of the market and so on. And I see that risk of maybe going back to, okay, let's find the one thing that works for everyone, the most common denominator and so on, which throws us back a couple of years, because now we're thinking about specific target groups, about D&I, that everyone is basically different and so on, more individualization. But AI or Gen AI is not per se kind of a limiter for that, or it's just how we use it overall.
Could you speak a bit about your experience of leveraging AI specifically in comms development and testing? You've touched upon it, but if you can just share your experience on some of the challenges, especially today when we are looking at the digital world. So we're looking at thousands of creatives and not just one. So what's been your experience of using AI there? I
mean, it's really early days there, because that requires usually a lot of computing power and so on. And I think also the industry. I mean, you have a massive industry around creative development and so on, agencies, and therefore, if you now can basically say, okay, I don't need all of that, I just need a chip and a nice prompt and so on. That's why I think there is some opposing force. From a pure insights perspective, the key advantage I see is when you think about, and we have the discussion now as we want to revamp our creative kind of process. Early in the process, you have something called either big brand idea, campaign idea, and so on. Usually, you would like to sense check that with consumers, but it's impossible because people are not used to that. I mean, I usually give that example back in the days when you still did focus groups on animatics or sometimes on storyboards. Usually, the first comment in every group was, I like it, but they should use real people. And I don't know. And I said, yeah, we will do that for sure. So we are used to seeing a brand manifesto, big brand idea, and then can think already about the campaign and so on. But respondents, the regular people that we want to get connection, that we want to basically buy our products, like our ads, they are used to seeing a finished ad, a finished film. But you can't produce that right away because that's all the production, all the alignment before. In the future, it might be quite easy to just produce it based on a prompt and just say, okay, produce something. It will not be the finished one, but it will help us to better understand what people think about the ideas, or bringing ideas to life. So I basically said also to our creative agency, in an ideal world, in order to test a big idea, we would need 10 different executions. Because if you only create one execution, if it doesn't score well, you don't know if it's because of the idea or the execution. If you create 10 very distinct executions and they all score reasonably well compared to a different idea, you know you have a great idea. You can lock that idea and never question it again. If then later down the creative development stage, you then see that something's not working, don't question the idea, question other steps in the process. You might not have the right talent, not the right message, and so on. And that's the big advantage that I see. So therefore, for me, the getting to an 80% ready or MVP kind of stimulus within a day and not within weeks and months is definitely something that I see as a very big advantage. I'm really excited about that because it makes life for us so much easier, and hopefully we create much better and emotionally engaging ads.
I was going to say, I think the application is really similar for innovation as it is for marketing, because you still need the deep human insight to have the winning idea, to build the creative. I think that there's real opportunity to use AI to help you build good briefs. And so we're pulling information from lots of different parts of the business. If you could have automatic briefs and say, and we're talking about it like a switchboard. So these are the variables and you say, yes, 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 even for innovation, like I want innovation horizon 3, it's for this human, it's, you know, and you press all the buttons and then AI should help you write the brief, do a bit of the discovery, but then you're going to hand over mostly to the creatives, you know, humans in the ad agencies who are going to help you and go a little bit more into that traditional mode. I guess depends on the level of the creative that you're building, if you're just sticking out on a social feed versus building video and things like that. But it's very similar.
Yeah, and the truth is that AIs at the moment are very good at writing, but they're not very good at creating video. So we're continuously looking at that. So it's much better for creating new product concepts than it is advertising campaigns. By the end of the year, that's not going to be true anymore. So it's changing so rapidly.
So yeah, I fully agree. It's discovery and and prototyping. I guess you would call, whether it's an animatic or in a concept. It's fantastic for sparking ideas that, as we were saying earlier, that you might not have had. Should you then bring a human in? Absolutely. But it's fantastic at the start.
I guess as one of those humans that works in innovation agency side, we obviously are there to be uber creative for your brands, but also to protect your confidentiality. And Nick, you were talking about sort of using your tools in ideation. You've got your internal tools and your external tools. Where are you on the journey of sort of agency partnerships and what are agencies allowed to do in this world and what are they not allowed to do?
I had to give over the rights to my firstborn child so I could work with Steve on an AI experiment. It's so hard. It's very conservative, but that's why I was saying our job is to keep on pushing the boundaries. It's tough.
Definitely worth it, though, wasn't it?
It was great fun.
Question.
Yeah, I've just got a question about if you think about, say, an innovation process where you go from, you know, foundational learning through insight to idea to concept, mix optimization, launch. Where do you see the opportunities to bring AI into that process to dramatically accelerate the innovation process? Because it occurs to me that there's a huge opportunity to do that. Are you experimenting in that area? Is there more that can be done?
Early, I think it was said often enough, so in the discovery phase, or however you call that early phase, because the key thing is it took you a long time to get from 0 to maybe 50, 60%, and then you different. So you were quickly at 30%. Then it took you a really long time to get from the 30 to the 70%, and then you at some point decide, okay, 70 is good enough, or 80, and so on. So I think nowadays you just start from a much higher base. So you get to 50% immediately, basically, and then you can spend more time. So that means, first of all, you cut time to market or cut time to basically get to great ideas or good discussions. But secondly, you also leave more time to really optimize and not stop at 70, maybe go to the 80, 90, or even 100%, maybe with Gen AI. So that's, I think, what I'm really excited that it always took so long. Also, just like, developing a product image. I mean, you had to talk to the agency and so on. It took ages. Now we're working still together with our agencies on that part, but it's so much quicker, and it's not as perfect, but it's also more comparable, because sometimes you had a great creative team working on something, and then it really looked good, and then the execution was maybe better than the idea. Now we can almost standardize it, and you always have a similar good execution, and therefore make it much more comparable.
I was just thinking, as you were saying that, it's discovered, but it's also the desirability is what AI can do. But if you think about the viability and the feasibility, that's typically depends very much on your internal context, and it's not always a job that Gen AI can do. And if you could just get Gen AI to scale innovation, wouldn't that be great? But like, how do you throw all of that into a Gen AI model to scale your innovation around the world and work out what do you change, what don't you change? It's a long way off.
When I think about kind of my insight career so far, some of the key moments have been soft skills, intangible skills. It's that aha moment there, or you're walking the dog and something really clicks and you've solved your positioning problem or whatever. Do you think that kind of skill and kind of being able to recognize what's a good insight, for example, and judge, you've got all of this information and someone has made a throwaway comment in a group and that could be your key insight. Do you think that kind of skill could be lost over time as we depend more and more on AI and all the discussions we're having?
I think it's a great insight. I think 100% correct. Indeed, that's where the really great insight comes, is not from the data or definitely with bias score, is that little nugget that no one looked at that suddenly makes a connection for you, connects the dot. Is AI able to do that right now, or will it ever be able to do? Definitely not right now. What it can do is spark, is give you new stimulus and further out their stimulus, because you can set it up in a way to really force some different thoughts. And then, but it's still, yes, there's still going to be that key need, I think, to connect those dots. So that's not going to be a change. We were talking just recently on it's a bit of akin to accountants who before used to spend all their time with creating doing the accounts books and so on. They got Excel. Did that make the accountants less valuable in a company? No, quite the reverse. It meant actually they're working higher level. They're not spending all their time doing the nuts and bolts and occasionally having one nugget saying, oh, maybe we can think about this differently. They're spending much more of their time, the good accountants, the accountants and financial analysts, not spending all their time doing the basic stuff. They're looking for those connections, trying to find the edge, etc. So I think that will not be lost. I think if anything will become even more important because we're spending less of our time doing the basics.
And I mean, it saves you time. That's the other thing, because I mean, everyone has these kind of memories that there was that one focus group where one person said something and that became the idea for the next 10 years of campaign or for big innovation and so on. But also remember, how often did you miss that one sentence because you were just kind of busy getting to the fridge and getting the next kind of Coke to don't fall asleep behind the mirror and so on. And now that's basically that's where Gen AI can come in, because then you have transcripts and then you can basically also prompt it and say, give me all the sentences that people talked about our category and so on. And then, yes, you get a list of 150, but you reading that through is so much easier, or even listening to it, than paying attention the whole time, where people talk 90% of the time they talk about stuff that nobody cares. And that's where it comes in. And I also recently read an article about kind of education for kids, because it's now, what should we teach our kids? Is math still important? Because I mean, you don't really need it. Yes, you need the basic understanding, but there was one quote that really found interesting, said, now that machines are getting better at machines and what machines are supposed to do, we have to teach people and our children to be better humans and be better at stuff that humans do. So meaning teaching empathy, teaching all these type of things, also detecting emotion maybe is also something that is currently not in the curriculum of most schools and education. I think that will be a very interesting bit for the future, to just say, can we divide and conquer the world? There are things that machines can really do well, not only in business, but also in private life. There are other things where they might not be good, or where we don't want them to be good, and therefore own that space for us.
I think the soft skills will become the competitive advantage. And I'm hearing more and more, and I'm liking it less and less when I ask someone and they say to me, I'm not your data monkey. And I'm like, you're right, you're not my data monkey. I wish I had a tool that could do this. But I think the real value is in the ability to I think you said this, innovation happens in the edge, right? On the edge. And it's just to connect things that a machine wouldn't connect the dots on. It's just to find that little gem of something, and that's what it can do, is help you find that spark. And Joe, who is our Zappi lead, talks a lot about it's the job of AI to diverge, and then the job of the humans to converge. If you think about the diamond, and that's how we're thinking about it a lot. Let AI open up our minds and give us all of the possibilities, and then we'll converge in a way that is right for us, for our business at this moment in time. So that's how we're thinking about it as well.
And if I can just build on that, because I think there's we often, one of the the mantras I use a lot is you've got to know the rules to break the rules, and that's where real innovation comes. And everybody wants to go out and break the rules, and that's what they think great advertising is. You can do that when you know the rules. What I think the AI and the machines can do is make sure that everybody knows what the correct way of doing something is, and then you go and do the thing that's the opposite of that. And that's where you'll get real innovation from. And it won't come from the machine, but it can make sure that you understood what the right thing to do was in the first place, so you ignore it. But you've got to. It helps to know what the right thing to do is.
Hi. So we've talked a lot about experimentation and process and that kind of stuff. I don't know if you can share any real life examples of where AI has actually created the first idea that's actually been launched into the marketplace. Have you had any success in that space?
Launch for us is a bit early because we basically started kind of last year, and then usually lead time is 18 months, shorter, sometimes a bit longer.
Maybe you could
So therefore, there will be definitely some things coming in 2025 that will be not fully AI generated, but at least with the help of AI kind of generated in all of our product categories. I mean, I don't have a single category where we're not having used AI to generate something that is at least currently on Innovation Grid. Will that be launched? Not 100% sure, but at least it's in the shortlisted set of innovations.
And I would say for us, we've done a few experiments mid last year. The speed to market is increasing, but already it's so integrated into our ways of working. Can you say are we saying this is a Gen AI proposition and this is a human proposition? No proposition that's going to market already now is purely human, right? All of them have had Gen AI involved somewhere in the process. I can guarantee you that's going to market now already. And it's just it's on that spectrum. And in the future, will they be where more of it was developed by Gen AI? Yeah, there will be.
Yeah, same for us. It's built into everything we do. I find it hard to believe when I do see companies saying that they've done something fully automated Gen AI. I don't believe it.
Yeah, we've done it for PR.
Our innovation work.
We call it PR, but it's the same. Yeah. It's the same department. Yeah.
So I think it's really striking, this thought of like Chat GPT in the end training itself just on its own previous data, and where does that leave us in the end, like you say, with the 2021 model. So it strikes me actually the competitive advantage then becomes your proprietary Gen AI that you're creating, and then making sure that that's fed with fresh insight. And then I think it becomes a case of like the power players, like the big guys, like some of your companies or Unilever or P&G or whatever, having then these kind of bespoke data sets. And then I guess I'm thinking, well, where does that leave the medium or smaller players? And actually, how can we lean harder on the role of the agency to kind of plug some of those gaps? Firstly, I guess, like, do you agree that ultimately that's kind of where it might end up, with like the competitive advantage being in the proprietary AI? And then maybe, I guess for Steve, like, how can we the agencies kind of take more ownership to support in that process?
I do think it's actually interesting as a technology. So most of the technologies that are built in the last sort of 20 years, from the internet to a lot of automation tools, factory automation stuff, have been to the massive advantage of small companies. So your speed to market for small companies is collapsed. You don't need as big a factory. You don't need as large a corporate system. You don't need as big enough. So there's been a huge advantage for small companies in the last 20 years. Weirdly, I'm with you. I think AI is going to be hugely advantageous for big companies because of those bespoke proprietary data assets, and because that's what the AI requires. If these guys are very good at managing the data asset, then I think there'll be a huge advantage. That will mean that there will be a space for a large data asset that is usable by smaller companies that would have to share it. So I suspect that will be a place in the market that builds up.
Because today I'm the same. I can run a need state study of a market that I'm not present in, and I can get that from AI. But I anticipate in 5 years that's no longer available to me because that information is kind of old, redundant, and circular.
I also think like it's easy to have a good idea. We're never short of good ideas. The job is to actually build the good idea and scale it. And, you know, so it doesn't, everyone can have a good idea, and actually still medium companies sometimes have more advantage in being able to scale more quickly, probably not at the acceleration rate that a bigger company would with more investment to scale, but everyone has their challenges, don't they, with scaling? I'm not sure any of us would say we've got it sorted.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Last chance. If not, I would like to thank, well, actually, I'd really like to thank you all for joining in for the conversation. I think it's been brilliant. Of course, mostly I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists, not only for appearing this morning and coming along to the wrong place and then the right place, but also, as I said in the beginning, for leading the industry. I honestly think you guys do. You help push us forward, you experiment, and you're prepared to do all of the problematic things that happen with experiments, like they go wrong. So thank you all, and thank you, Babita, for organising.